Cool. It looks like everything's connected. And just so the listeners know, we're kind of, we know the live is going right now, but we're kind of chilling for a little bit just so that we can get people to hop on. Looks like the number's going up. Oh yeah, we're going viral, you guys. But yeah, so like we'll talk for what? How much time do you have, Patricia, today? Maybe like 30, 45 minutes or however long.
I think so.
However long is good for you. And
Yeah.
if there's at any point you need to like hop out, just let us know. We're completely understanding with your schedule, and I'm glad we were all able to come together today. And even though we're all working from home, we're still working essentially with all the changes. My situation hasn't really changed. I've always worked from home. I think Matthew's still in his office since there's not a lot of people there. How's it going over there in Florida?
It's going well. We half of our team is remote, and then half of our team was office based. So we're all remote now and figuring it out with our kids. I think we have a lot of working parents, so a lot of kids that are at home with us going to school online as well.
Yep.
Yeah, my 14-year-old's on the floor right here. You can't see him. It's a 14-year-old border collie. So I don't have any real kids, but we're doing the dog thing for a while now in our little condo. And
Excellent.
He's my number one coworker. He gets Employee of the Month all the time. I'd show you him, but I don't have an easy way of moving the laptop, and I don't want to drop it, so I won't. I'll send a picture to everybody later. But
okay, sorry, getting a little. Put my hair back for this.
Should I introduce everyone?
Yeah. So Matthew, thanks for hosting us and doing the hard part at asking the questions and stuff. Thanks everybody for hopping on. Thanks for the listeners hopping on. Looks like we have a good amount of people. So let's get into it.
Great. So welcome. This is a broadcast by the Educational Freedom Institute. And Corey and I are glad to have Patricia Levesque with us today. She's the CEO of the Foundation for Excellence in Education. It's a nonprofit that supports state leaders in transforming education to unlock opportunity and lifelong success for each and every child. Patricia, you served as Governor Jeb Bush's Deputy Chief of Staff for Education Enterprise Solutions for Government, Minority Procurement, and Business and Professional Regulation. And previously, Patricia served 6 years in the Florida State Legislature in the Speaker's Office and as Staff Director over Education Policy. So thanks for joining us, Patricia. We appreciate your time. And just a couple of minutes ago, we all said we're in these unique times, right? We're working from home. We're doing the best we can to practice social distancing. I have my own kind of space, so I get to come into the office still. But anyway, we're glad to have you here with us today to talk about Florida going online, going digital. So
thank you.
Appreciate your time today.
You're welcome. Thank you. Welcome to my kitchen, which is where I'm stationed right now.
Looks great. So we have a kind of an outline we want to follow, but we are going to I'll check periodically our social media channels to see if anything comes in that way for any of us in the group here as we move along. But if we could just start by, if you wouldn't mind, Patricia, just giving us an overview of the Florida Virtual School, of online instruction generally in Florida. You have the history on all of this, and it would be good to know some of that as a backdrop.
Sure. And I'll just be linear, and I'll start from the beginning, which unbelievably it was 24 years ago. So 24 years ago, there was the Department of Education, the Commissioner of Education at the time, Frank Brogan, gave a grant to Orange County School District, that is Central Florida, that's Orlando, to develop what was dubbed as a web school back then. The founder of the project is named Julie Young, And she is now, just so you know, with Arizona State University's digital program as well. But that little bitty program, I remember because I started working in education policy in 1997. It turned into this little bitty line item in the budget that was called Project Orange. And it was a partnership between the Orange County School District, Orlando, and the Alachua County School District, which is Gainesville, just to develop and share web courses together. And within really 1 year after they started doing that, the legislature realized we've got something here. There's an appetite. We should be investing in more of this, and it's a little bitty project. So believe it or not, in just the next year, 1998, Florida Virtual School was essentially launched. It wasn't called Florida Virtual School back then, but it started with the goal of having online courses to serve public school students, private school students, and home education students. So from its founding, the school was intended to serve all of those populations of students for free, for the public to provide that as a service. Over the years, the school really started as a high school model, but then over the years, the legislature ended up letting them serve middle school students, and then eventually to serve all the way K through 12. One thing that the legislature did very early on in Governor Bush's tenure was give the Florida Virtual School the opportunity to do what you may be reading about in other states, but they gave the virtual school permission to launch what is called Florida Virtual School Global, which was Florida leaders' concept of, hey, if our little gem here that's a public school can serve students out of state and in other countries for them to pay Florida Virtual School, we could use those funds to actually develop more curriculum and coursework for Florida students, and our taxpayers wouldn't be paying for that. So it was a seedling of an idea. They got authorization back in 2000 to start doing this, and 6 years later, Florida Virtual School called what is now known as Florida Virtual School Global School and Global Services. And I will tell you that last year, through the Global Service Program, they served more than 3,000 students in 48 states, Washington, D.C., and 65 countries. So over time, the Florida Virtual School, again, it started as a 2-district partnership. It was a high school, then a middle high school, then a K-12 school. It was given the authorization to serve kids from out of state. But all of it was intended to, how do we give more parents in Florida and their kids opportunities and flexibility and options? One of the neatest stories, I think, is, most states probably have a law on their books about private tutoring, right? So if you have athletes, tennis players, kids that are training for the Olympics that can't do a normal school day, most states have a provision in the law that allows them to do something different, right? Well, Florida just took that concept and I would say put it on steroids through Florida Virtual School, because there were Allie Raisman. I don't know if you remember her. She was a woman on the U.S. Gymnastics team the last 2 Summer Olympics. She was a Florida resident, and she used the Florida Virtual School. We have a lot of so the school's been in place for a long time. It has a full curriculum of almost 190 courses, but it didn't happen overnight, right? It started with a concept, and that concept was, how do we continue to provide student-centered education for our kids, knowing that we need a lot of different options, and here we are with Florida Virtual School.
Yeah, so thanks for giving us a little bit of the history on that. I want to point out that, although Florida Virtual School has been around for a long time, and there's, been a lot of work put into this expansion of this program for this school, it's really popped up in the news a lot lately. I started seeing a lot of stuff about it because of the coronavirus and how virtual schools are, in a good position right now to be able to help families who need additional resources. And I saw, something in the news about how the Florida virtual schools are serving all types of schools, private schools, charter schools, public schools. You hit on that a little bit. And then also something even more recently, I think this was less than a week ago, you said that, like 48 states or something have already been partnering with Florida virtual schools. So this has already been going on before it was even on my radar. But I thought it was just interesting that the state of Alaska has just, established a new partnership with Florida Virtual School. I think the last time I saw this was just a week ago. Do you have any, additional information on how, Florida Virtual School is kind of partnering with states like Alaska, or
Sure.
even just how they're responding to maybe increases in demand as a result of the COVID-19?
Sure. Sure. And let me clarify, Florida Virtual School has been serving students in 48 states. So I think the Alaska partnership is the first official partnership with a state, a state entity. And their model is, and I'll try to use not the formal terms necessarily, but to use Florida Virtual School, you can be a full-time student, right? So you can sign up and have your classes delivered by Florida Virtual School teachers. You can be a part-time student, or what you can do is have a partnership or a licensure, or in Florida, they're called franchise agreements. So another thing that the Florida legislature did several years ago was the state decided, we know that in the future, right? Back then, maybe the statistic was 20% of college students take their coursework online. We knew we wanted to expand the online capabilities of our school districts, and quite frankly, there were other virtual providers, right? One thing that Florida has never been is it's the government-run virtual program and that's it, or it's the government-run traditional public school and that's it. And so there were other private providers of online instruction that also wanted to serve Florida students. And so the way the legislature dealt with that was in 2009, I believe it was, the legislature told every single school district, we want you to have 3 different virtual options for your students. And so every district could decide what those were. So districts could create their own. They could contract with any of the providers. Back then it was K-12 and Connections that were some of the private providers that the state had been working with. Or you could use Florida Virtual School. And in using Florida Virtual School, you could either let your students go directly and be served through the Florida Virtual School system, or you could do what was called a franchise. And this is what I think is more of what Alaska has done with Florida Virtual School, which is the school district's own teachers are teachers, but they are licensing for the use of Florida Virtual School's courses, the curriculum, the platform, those types of services, but their own teachers are providing the instruction. And so that model has been in place. And I want to say all of Florida school districts ended up doing some sort of partnership or relationship with Florida Virtual School since 2009, 2010. So they've even had experience over the last decade, even though in some school districts it was pretty small partnership, but they've had that experience in having some of their teachers learning how to teach online using Florida Virtual School content. So again, it was one of those baby steps no one could have foreseen 10 years ago, that it would have been a good muscle for our school districts to exercise, but they started exercising that muscle in a small way about 10 years ago. And then the legislature started, doing other things, saying, we're going to move testing online. We are going to change the high school graduation requirements, so students need to take one course online for high school graduation. All of these things over time had the effect of school districts building up and the legislature funding digital devices, right? School districts figuring out all the different opportunities through their own offering or through Florida Virtual School or other offerings for kids to get that access to an online virtual course. So I think a lot of these things built into this foundation that allowed the Florida Board of Education last week to say, we've got this emergency funding and we're going to invest it into servers and expanding, platform capacity. And oh, by the way, in a month, we'll have the ability to serve 2.7 million students. Like that was able to be done because of this platform of a lot of policies, which really just meant every year, how can we provide more opportunities? How can we have a system that's built around what's best for the kid?
So the numbers that I saw as far as adoption, if we're just, because 2.7 million
is what they would have capacity to do.
Right. And that looks like, if I remember right, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but what I remember is that they would do that by May 1st. Does that sound right to you? Or May 4th? There it is.
Yeah, they'd have the capacity. It would be in place by then. Not every school will need it. A lot of schools have figured out how to do it on their own, have built their own systems. But to have that ability to do that, I think is a really incredible thing.
Yeah, it is. There's no doubt.
Hey, Patricia, I'm just kind of thinking about maybe what some of the audience may be thinking the same thing, just related to funding and how that actually, how that works. I can kind of see how this could work with Alaska if they're doing like this outsourcing and partnership where Alaska can pay Florida Virtual School from their budget for the services that they're receiving. But what if the students are the ones being served? How does the funding work between an individual student and Florida Virtual School from outside of the state?
Sure. Well, I don't have all the specifics on the exact costs, but you would almost perceive Florida Virtual to be like a private school. So you have the opportunity to enroll full time, or you have the opportunity to just sign up for a single course. So depending on what model you as a individual family or student want to pursue, you could pursue that model.
Okay, that really helps a lot. I almost think that, and yeah, I mean, like it probably differs from state to state, but what would prevent a student from using a voucher in a particular state, like let's say North Carolina Opportunity Scholarship or something, and using it at Florida Virtual School? I would think that should be okay. I don't know the specifics though, and I don't know if there's I don't know how many examples of that there actually are.
I think you'd have to, it would probably depend on state law. Probably most private school choice or education scholarship account legislation, there's typically limits to, you have to be a Florida resident or, like a state resident, and you have to use it in the state. I know that last year there were a couple of bills on, education scholarship accounts where they would allow a parent to take that scholarship to use in a school that was right on the border of that particular state. I think
Arizona did that.
Yeah, I think Arizona did it, and I think there was a provision in another state. So unless the state, like named Florida Virtual School or didn't have a physical presence requirement, they could probably do it if they didn't have those provisions in law.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it shouldn't matter where the school is located, or it should just matter, that the kid's getting an education. And if the theory for why we're funding a child's education through the state is that that state's having a more educated populace, it shouldn't matter where that kid's getting the education. Yeah. I think you brought up that Arizona. There was a big fight in Arizona recently to not allow students on the Native American reservation near the border to allow them to use their scholarship funding, like 1 mile to 2 mile into the next state over. I think Arizona just passed that, which allows those students to continue doing so. But there was a fight. And, the argument was that you're sending money,
To another
Arizona
state.
money out of state.
Mhm.
But I mean, the reality is the public schools do that too. I mean, the public schools buy textbooks from California or Texas. They buy calculators from Texas out of state. So I mean, that's not sending money out of out of state. It's just helping students get a better education. Um, so
Yeah.
hopefully more states can expand use like that for these virtual options, because there's no reason why a kid in California, if they did have a voucher program, shouldn't be able to use that at a school in New York if it's a very successful, organizations.
Yeah, and if you think about it, in the times that we're in, it certainly, I think, the hope would be that policymakers would be providing more options for the parents of the kids in their state. I've used the example a lot when we were working on blended learning policies or more what we call course access, where it's just an individual course. I mean, who wouldn't? Juilliard, right, the performing arts school that is so renowned in New York City, offers some content online. Who wouldn't want to let their kids in their own state have the honor and the privilege of being able to take some courses through Juilliard, right? If you really think about it, the delivery of instruction, especially online and through distance learning, geographic barriers really don't mean much. I think there are different things that you need to pay attention to in terms of quality, but certainly, geographic borders shouldn't matter.
Yeah.
Absolutely agree. And I found the latest, or this might not be the latest, but when this, was going on, this isn't the latest. This one's from 2019. Something else came up in 2020, but this is what was going on in Arizona. There was a big fight, to, whether to allow students on the reservation to be able to use the vouchers in New Mexico, just across the
that
border.
one was kind of a Band-Aid. The one that they passed just a few weeks ago, actually, in the legislature in Arizona, is a longer term fix. It's kind of funny still, though, and this is, you can appreciate this, Patricia, with your background in the legislature in Florida, that some of the legislation that gets through is kind of funny, and it's short-sighted, and in that way, it's funny, I guess. In this one in particular, that just passed a few weeks ago, it gives students the ability to, and in this case, Native American students, it gives Native American students the ability to use their education dollars within, I think it said something like 5 miles of the Arizona border. So if you attend a school within 5 miles of the Arizona border, then you can, then it's fine, and that's doable. But again, it's kind of funny that they put that stipulation on, that it's 5 miles. The reason they did it is because the school that these particular students, these Navajo students, were attending is within 2 miles of their homes, but it's still in the Navajo reservation, so it's actually within their own lands, but the state line runs through the reservation. And so anyway, it's kind of funny, but that's what legislation does sometimes.
No, I think there's so many examples. I could give you a Florida virtual school example. Even though the program was started to serve, like I said, public, private, and home education students, it was all on a part-time basis, so individual courses. And when Florida virtual school started moving into a full-time model where they could actually issue a diploma for students who were graduating, it became, let's say, a bit more attractive for some parents when you could actually earn a diploma right through the school. And so the legislature started putting, or did, ended up putting all of these prior public attendance requirements. So you have to have been in the public school before you could enroll into Florida virtual school full time. Like if you wanted to take one course less than full time, totally okay. If you're going to be a full-time student, because budget staffers thought, oh, that's going to draw more kids in, right, that we currently aren't paying for, they put these things in. And so year after year, we would have to advocate for, well, don't make kindergartners part of the prior public. And then, so we win that. And the next year it's, don't make first graders part of the prior public. And sometimes I just want to, talk to lawmakers and the team that works around them to say, I totally understand what you're doing. It makes complete sense from a budget perspective, but let me have you meet this mom who's, because of the child's special needs, or this one mom, it was a behavioral issue that, because he was so severely, I want to say ADHD, he could not he needed to be in a very contained environment in order for him to focus. She had started him in Florida virtual school when he was in a kindergartner, and then in first grade. And then she gets a letter saying, we're so sorry you can't participate next year in this capacity, right? Because second graders weren't allowed unless they had been in the public school system the prior year, even though Florida virtual school was a public school. It didn't count, right? And so you have to, it makes no sense. This mother was heartbroken. We were thrilled because that was the year that we were able to get them to just take off the prior public attendance requirement. And this mother, I remember when we gave her the news at the end of session that the law had changed, she was in tears, and she took the letter, the denial letter that had been up on her refrigerator. She had just been fretting over it. What am I going to do? Where am I going to put him next year? And she had a fun tearing up that denial letter type of party after the session was over. But it's true, different reasons that lawmakers make decisions that make sense purely from a political or a budget standpoint, but not from how is a parent going to navigate what you have just put in place in order to get a good education for their child.
Yeah, I mean the voucher programs do the same kind of thing, where they'll require the students to switch from a public to a private, and it creates a lot of difficulties. And some families will even switch out of the private school, go to a public school for 100 days, and then switch back to the private school with the voucher, just so they can, and that creates a lot of difficulties for the public school system having to adjust to these kids. It obviously creates difficulties for the family and the student having to switch schools back and forth. And so it creates all these weird incentives. And it's all just, like you said, it's all a political issue. It's budgeting, right?
Issue.
Because the argument is that we weren't funding these kids in the public schools before. And so in order to save money, we have to only allow kids who were already in public schools to be able to use. But just from a theoretical perspective, if we're investing in education for every single child, it shouldn't matter if they came from a public school or a private school. I mean, there's a lot of, low-income families who... It's not my dog. That's not my dog.
That's mine.
But there's a lot of low-income families who, scrape to get by and don't have a voucher. And then when the voucher program gets into play, if there's this requirement that you must switch, well, too bad. They're out of luck. They are no longer able to access the program just because, they were able to barely get by and afford the private school.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess that's similar with this Florida virtual school as well, and other.
It was not now. Now any public school, private school, home education student can enroll full time if they want to.
So I think that's great, and I want to talk about that. Actually, I have a question for you about that. Do you think that will stick, Patricia? Do you think because there's a lot of talk right now about families making adjustments that right now feel temporary because of the situation that everyone is in, really globally, but that some of those temporary changes might actually turn out to be permanent. Do you think, and what are you hearing on the ground?
Sure.
Like, do you think that some people are going to say, actually this works for me, and I didn't know it would, but once we got into the routine, like, we're just going to stick with it, and maybe we'll stay in the Florida virtual school? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's an incredible experiment, I should say, that's going on. I mean, the circumstances are certainly tragic that we're having to go through it, but I do think there's parents like me who, I'm at home all day long now with my children, and I have to tell you, I feel really blessed that I still have a job and that I have a job that allows me to work virtually, but getting to see my kids all day long, having meals with them, watching what they're doing and being able to help them during the day, it is hard, but it is really rewarding. And so will there be moms who say, I love it and I'm going to stick with it if I can? Moms and dads, I think absolutely. I think there are a lot of people that will not, even if they wanted to, will not from an economic standpoint. They're going to have to go back to work. And listen, for some kids, I have two. One of them, the online schooling through our school is going really well, pretty self-motivated, and another one that I'm having to do the next thing, do the next thing. So listen, online schooling is not the right fit for every child, but that's the beauty of having policies that allow for pluralism in your options, right? Because I can figure out what's best for my children. And I want other people to have that opportunity. And what's best for your children may be different for each child. And it may be different each year based on your life circumstances. What I do think is in Florida, a lot more families are going to have opportunities to see. Some school districts are going to do a great job. I mean, some school districts in the state of Florida have gone online. They have the devices, they had the bandwidth plan, their teachers, they had the private partners where they were able to convert within a week to get their schools online. And there are others like in the city of Tallahassee where parents are going to pick up printed packets still, right? I think some parents in my county may decide that's not for me, this printed packet stuff, and I want more for my child, and may seek out other opportunities. And we're blessed to be in a state that those opportunities are provided at through a publicly funded education. So the parent doesn't have to, deal with the fiscal impact of wanting to make a different decision for their child. They can just seek out all the different alternatives that are out there. And that is something that I hope in more and more states, parents rise up and say, this was not working for my child and we need more. And that more should be that public schools are doing more and come up with a continuity of learning plan so that every single child, right, can access learning through times like these. So students with special needs and English language learners and low-income students, that they all have access to quality instruction, but that they also have a pluralism of options, because those states hopefully realize it's unfair to demand of one system to do it all. I mean, that's really an impossible situation that public schools really are faced with, when the reality is many different providers, many different governance models would provide a lot of solutions for kids. And then every system can hone in on being the best that it can be.
So we talked with Ron Matus earlier from Step Up for Students about the Hope Scholarship Program. And I was just thinking, one reason why people might want to go to virtual is that maybe they were being bullied in their brick and mortar school, and maybe they have some type of specific learning disability that makes them, better off in the virtual setting. Do you know if the Hope Scholarship would allow a student to, to attend a school virtually as well, or is it only brick and mortar schools?
Sure. Yeah. So since Florida virtual school is a public virtual school, parents don't need to get a scholarship to go to Florida virtual school. But let's say a parent did want to take the Gardner Scholarship, which would be a great example. That's the education scholarship account for students with special needs, where the parent doesn't have to enroll the child in a private school. They could decide to home educate their child, in which case they could register as a private school student, right, with Florida Virtual School, and use part of their scholarship to pay for one or two of those courses, whatever the parent felt like the student needed. So yes, that opportunity is available in Florida under all of the under the scholarship account options, I should say. The vouchers or the tax credits are more limited to, you take it to the, to the private school that you select for your child.
And have you heard of any differences between sectors? Like, we talked a lot about the Florida Virtual School, which is a district or government-run
Sure.
virtual school. Are there virtual charter schools in Florida that are also adapting or
Sure.
serving more students as a result? Because in other states, just we've talked on a
Sure.
different call, students have actually been blocked from being allowed to switch from
Mhm.
the brick and mortar to the virtual. What
Mm-hmm.
is it going on
Yeah.
differently in Florida?
Well, we do have virtual charter schools, and so there are other providers in the state that run virtual schools through virtual charters, and or they are the virtual provider that the school district contracts with. Remember, our school districts have to offer, depending on the size of the district, between 1 to 3 virtual options for their students. I do believe that I don't have actual data on how many more students were switching from their traditional school district to a virtual program or through the Florida Virtual School. I will say that I have heard it anecdotally of people who are considering people who made the switch because they gave their school district the opportunity after spring break to see what kind of instruction would go on. And if they weren't pleased, then they made the switch. Some parents decided to make the switch in high school because their child was, let's say, taking an AP course. And before they take that AP exam, they wanted a couple more months of teacher instruction on the content before the student took the test. But one thing that the Florida Department of Education did was, because this is a really unique time, right? With every school closed and different schools having different capabilities of providing that online coursework, they did just announce, and I want to say it was this week, an agreement so that the process that's in place now is a public school student would have to withdraw from their school district in order to enroll in Florida Virtual School full time. And then they would have a Florida Virtual School teacher. And they have just, done an agreement and a partnership so that kids don't have to enroll from their public school in order to continue to get that instruction from Florida Virtual School. And so the school districts are able to retain that student in their counts, still generate the funding. And it's, it's actually, for right now, it's a very parent friendly decision, so that parents don't have to figure out, what do I have to do with this system and change into this system. They can just say, hey, I want my child to take Florida Virtual School courses, but remain in this particular school district. And so they've created a pathway for parents to do that as well, for single courses or for all their courses.
Do those teachers from the students in that situation, do the teachers still teach, or are they using Florida Virtual School teachers but staying enrolled in their current school? Do you know?
It's the latter. It's the latter for that particular program that I talked about. But the former is an option for school districts, right? So if school districts want to have that agreement with Florida Virtual School to use their content, to use their system, they can still have their own public school teachers providing the instruction, if that's what the school district wants to do as well. That's an option for them.
And it looks like the Sentinel is reporting that about 3,400 teachers are learning how to use the system. And this is a week old maybe or so, but well, no, it is exactly actually a week old. So I'm sure that number has gone up, but that's interesting. Yep, that's the article right there actually.
Yeah, one thing that Florida Virtual School put in place very early on, and the commissioner actually came up with funding to train up to 10,000 teachers in how to teach online. because it is different from, an in-person instruction. And so Florida Virtual School began, I want to say it was pretty early in March, to offer training sessions so that traditional public school teachers could learn, here are the keys to, when you're teaching online, here are effective, lessons learned, and how we train our own teachers. And so really proud of the state for putting that training provision in place at least a month and a half ago.
So
Yeah.
I had a question. So you were describing how students could enroll in Florida Virtual School, but then the district-run school would still keep them on the enrollment counts. How long would the students stay on their enrollment counts? Would it be throughout the rest of their K through 12 experience, or
For
do they
this
come off
year,
by next? Okay.
that was an emergency provision for this year. And then I think, again, for next year, if we reopen schools the way that you normally would, the parents already have the option to go and take virtual courses through their district, through Florida Virtual School in a full-time capacity or in a part-time capacity. So all those different options that existed before the pandemic will continue to exist. This is one that I think is just a smart measure for this period of time, to not require a lot of paperwork shuffling, when the reality is during this time we're funding both systems.
Yeah.
We're going to make sure they're funded through the rest of the school year, and that parents can get what they need for their child.
Well, it seems like Florida is doing it the right way. I mean, Oregon was the worst example, in my opinion, of how they responded to this. They didn't let students transfer to virtual charter schools at all. And then Pennsylvania is still allowing students to switch to virtual schools, but the virtual schools aren't being compensated for those additional enrollments, while the brick and mortar schools still get compensated for the enrollment. Florida looks like it's kind of found the sweet spot, in that it's compensating the Florida Virtual School or virtual charter schools that the kids are switching to, but then also holding the district schools harmless, just because of this unprecedented situation that we're in. So I think Florida, other states should probably look to Florida and see how you guys have.
And how the leadership has been responding to, one other thing that's really different, I think, in some states, the directive is schools are closed, and if you can't provide to all, you provide to none. And it's the exact opposite. The commissioner is telling school districts, we expect you to keep teaching. We're funding you. We want to see your plan. How are you making sure kids are getting an education? And hopefully it's a robust one. And you're grading, assignments, and you're having contact with the kids virtually, but the expectation is there that instruction is continuing. And that's why they've put a lot of the provisions in place, including for, high school graduation. It is, yes, the exit exam tests, because we're not administering this year, don't count, but everything else does. The number of credits, the GPA, all of those things still matter, and we want instruction to continue. In some other states, we've even seen they've lowered the high school graduation requirements. I want to say it was Wisconsin said, this year it's 15 credits. We're just gonna make it 15 credits this year. So I really think if your state and your state leaders see that your role is to provide the funding and the policy structure to ensure every child gets a high quality education, and then you let 1,000 flowers bloom, right? You create the structure for private, robust home education, robust online schooling, robust partnerships between, and public charter schools, robust partnerships between all of them. You're much more able to adapt to the change, and you can set high expectations, because it's education. This is about the kids. It's about the limited opportunities they have to get them ready so that they can succeed in the future.
That's a high five if we weren't social distance. Patricia,
You weren't telling her to stop, were you?
no, that was a high five.
I got it.
So we're right up against 45 minutes right now. And it's been great talking with you, Patricia. We really appreciate your time. The history on virtual school and just going back in time, 24 years, right? And then coming forward, that's super helpful just to have that as a backdrop. But really, Florida has shown, like was mentioned in one of the comments that you brought up, Corey, from social right there, you guys have been, paving the way nationally. And we talked with Ron about this a little this morning. It's good to have Florida as a role model to just show us, like you said, Patricia, let a thousand flowers bloom, right? Because every kid is different. Every kid is unique and they have different needs. And so we really appreciate your time coming on with Corey and I today, and keep up the great work there in Florida and with ExcelinEd. We really appreciate everything you're doing out there.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you for the work that you're doing in spreading the message. That I think every system would be better if it revolved around the student and the needs of the student.
Awesome. Great way to end it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Have a good one.